Rain streaked down the windshield, blurring the skyline of downtown Boston into watercolor. Inside, her old Honda Civic. Clara Monroe gripped the steering wheel, her heart racing faster than the wipers could keep up. The scent of coffee filled the car, mostly because half of it was now on her blouse. She let out a shaky laugh that sounded more like a sigh. Have you ever had one of those mornings where everything you touch seems to fall apart, and you wonder if the universe is testing how far you can bend before you break? The light turned green. Clara hit the gas. Her dream interview started 20 minutes ago, 3 blocks away, in a glass tower that suddenly felt a mile high. She could already imagine the receptionist's tight smile, the ticking clock, the polite rejection. Still, she kept going. Her mother's old words echoed in her head. You don't stop showing up just because life gets messy. When the elevator doors finally closed around her, she caught her reflection hair slightly frizzed, eyes too tired for a Monday. Yet, somewhere beneath the panic, there was still a spark, a stubborn spark that refused to be small. She didn't know it yet, but this morning, this terrible, coffee-stained, late-for-everything morning was about to change everything. And that's how it began, the story of a woman who walked into her worst day and found her destiny waiting behind a smile. The rain had eased to a fine mist by the time Clara Monroe pulled her aging Honda Civic into the narrow parking lot behind Drake Innovations. The wipers squeaked once, twice, then gave up with a tired groan, like even they'd lost hope for her morning. Her coffee cup sat half empty in the holder, a brown stain spreading across the front of her cream blouse. She dabbed at it with a tissue that only made it worse. Perfect, she muttered under her breath, watching the dark spot bloom larger, like the universe had decided to sign its name on her chest. She checked the clock on her phone. 9:26 a.m. Her interview had started at 9 sharp. 26 minutes late. Not fashionably, not forgivably, just late. For a brief, dangerous second. She considered turning around, drive home, crawl under a blanket, tell herself it wasn't meant to be. But then she pictured her father's old hands handing her the last $100 bill he'd saved, whispering, "Go make them see you." That image alone pulled her upright again. The building towered above her, a glass and steel monolith piercing the gray Boston sky. Inside, everything smelled of espresso and ambition. Polished marble floors reflected people who looked like they had never been late a day in their lives. Clara smoothed her blouse, squared her shoulders, and walked in. At the reception desk, a young woman with flawless posture and a sharper manicure glanced up. Her name tag read Melissa. Her eyes flicked over Clara's damp hair, her wrinkled skirt, the faint coffee stain. "Can I help you? Clara Monroe?" She cleared her throat. "I had a 9 o'clock interview with Human Resources." Melissa's polite smile didn't waver, but it cooled a few degrees. "It's 9:26, I know." Clara offered a small, helpless laugh, the kind you use when you're standing on a cliff. There was an accident on I-93 and Melissa's nails clicked on the keyboard. "Mr. Drake doesn't usually reschedule interviews." "Mr. Drake," Clara repeated, confused. "I thought it was with HR." Another small, efficient smile. "It is, but Mr. Drake sometimes likes to meet candidates himself." A strange silence settled between them, broken only by the distant hum of elevators and the soft rhythm of Clara's own heartbeat. She could feel heat creeping up her neck. Melissa finally looked up. "You can wait, but I can't promise they'll still see you." Clara nodded, clutching her tote bag like it might keep her from falling apart. She found a seat near the window and sat, trying to breathe slowly. Her reflection in the glass looked both older and younger than she remembered a woman holding on by willpower, and the girl she used to be when everything still felt possible. From somewhere nearby, the elevator dinged. A group of executives stepped out, laughing softly. The sound made her stomach twist. "What am I even doing here?" she thought. "They'll take one look at me and know I don't belong." But then her gaze landed on a cleaning lady wiping the corner of the reception glass, humming under her breath. The woman smiled when she caught Clara's eye, a simple, kind smile, the kind that says you're still standing. That's something. Clara smiled back, small, tired, real. When the receptionist finally motioned for her to go in, Clara's legs felt like rubber. She pressed the elevator button, watching the numbers blink upward. The soft instrumental music inside was painfully cheerful, like it was mocking her heartbeat. What if they've already moved on? What if I'm just walking in to be humiliated? The doors slid open on the 24th floor. The air smelled faintly of cedar and rain-soaked pavement. A long corridor stretched ahead, lined with framed photographs of the company's milestones, smiling faces, glossy awards, success stories. She paused at one. Drake Innovations, building the future with integrity. She almost laughed. Integrity, she thought. That's what I'm hanging on to, right? A woman in a navy skirt suit approached, tablet in hand. Ms. Monroe. Clara straightened instinctively. Yes, follow me, please. Her heels clicked against the marble as they passed glass-walled offices, filled with people typing fast and talking faster. She caught fragments of conversations, deadlines, contracts, projections, words that sounded like another language. The woman stopped at a door. Here you are, Mr. Drake will be with you shortly. The door closed behind her with a soft thud. The office was larger than her entire apartment, wide windows overlooking the Charles River, sunlight cutting across the floor in pale stripes. On a low table sat a tray of untouched croissants beside a single glass of water. Clara set down her bag, exhaled, and tried to rehearse her lines. Good morning. Thank you for seeing me. I'm passionate about brand strategy, and I believe the door opened. She turned quickly, expecting an HR manager in a blazer and kind eyes. Instead, a man stood by the window, back to her, hands in his pockets, tall, shoulders squared. His reflection in the glass showed a clean jawline, a suit too well fitted to be borrowed, and eyes that didn't look like they missed much. He spoke without turning. You're late. Clara froze. Yes, 26 minutes. His tone was calm, but the air in the room seemed to thin. I know, she said quietly. There was traffic, and traffic exists for everyone. He turned then, and his eyes met hers, gray, steady, unreadable. If this were a client meeting, you'd already have lost the account. For a second, Clara felt the familiar instinct to apologize, shrink, disappear, the same one she'd learned after years of being told she was too sensitive, too talkative, too much. But something inside her, maybe exhaustion, maybe pride pushed back. I understand, she said, straightening her spine, but I'm here now. The faintest hint of surprise crossed his face. That's one way to look at it. Silence. Only the sound of rain ticking softly against the window. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. She obeyed, though her heart thudded so loud she was sure he could hear it. The man picked up a file from the desk, her resume, no doubt, and scanned it with the kind of focus that could peel skin. Clara Monroe. He read aloud. Freelance consultant, marketing background, community college graduate, no Ivy League, no major agency experience. His tone wasn't cruel, just clinical. Clara forced a small smile. You missed the part where I'm persistent. That earned her the briefest flicker of amusement. Quickly gone, he set the file down. We'll see if that's true. Clara's pulse pounded in her ears, but somewhere beneath the fear, a strange calm began to form. Maybe because she'd already hit rock bottom that morning. Maybe because there was nothing left to lose. Outside, the rain began again, soft, steady, like a drumbeat under everything unspoken. She didn't know yet being late would change everything. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, thin lines tracing down the tall glass windows behind him. Clara stood just inside the door, her pulse quick and uneven, as if it hadn't yet realized she'd stopped running. The man by the window didn't move at first. He stood with one hand in his pocket, the other resting lightly against the frame, his reflection blending into the silver skyline of Boston. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but sharp enough to cut the air in two. "You're late." Clara swallowed. The words landed heavier than they should have. "Yes, sir. I'd 26 minutes." He still hadn't turned around. You realize that's longer than most people get for an interview. Her mouth opened, then closed. Every apology she'd rehearsed on the elevator dissolved like sugar in hot water. He turned then, and she felt the full weight of his gaze. Calm, cool, assessing. The kind of look that didn't just see what you were wearing, it saw the places you'd tried to hide. "I'm sorry," she said at last. "There was an accident on I-93 and traffic happens every day." Something about his tone, polite, but cold, scraped against the fragile wall she'd built around her, mourning. "I know," she said softly, then added before she could stop herself. "But life happens every day too." A beat of silence, his brow lifted, barely. "Is that your excuse?" "No." She met his eyes, even though every instinct told her to look away. "It's a reminder." He studied her, a faint muscle moving in his jaw. "Of what?" "That I showed up anyway." It slipped out before she could smooth it into something safer. Her chest tightened. Why did I say that? Years of polite restraint tried to pull the words back, but they were already there raw, trembling, alive. His eyes didn't leave hers. "Most people," he said slowly, "show up on time." She almost laughed, but it came out as a short breath instead. "Most people don't spill coffee on themselves, lock their keys in the car, and still try to look confident walking into a building like this." He didn't smile, but the air shifted, almost imperceptibly, like a curtain had been drawn aside for just a second. Then he walked to the desk and picked up a folder. "Sit down, Ms. Monroe." She obeyed, her knees brushing the edge of the sleek chair. The leather was cold, so was his tone when he began. "Clara Monroe. Marketing background, freelance consultant, not the usual pedigree." Meaning, he said, eyes still on the paper. "We get candidates from Harvard, MIT, Columbia. You went to community college." Clara's pulse quickened again. "That's correct. And you think you're qualified to work here." There it was. The question behind every polite smile she'd ever endured. She drew a breath, steady, quiet. "I think qualifications don't always fit on paper." That made him look up. "Is that another reminder?" "No." She leaned forward slightly. "It's a fact." For a second, neither of them moved. The soft hum of the city below filled the silence, a distant siren, the whisper of rain, the tick of a clock that seemed suddenly too loud. He finally closed the folder, set it aside, and leaned back in his chair. "You don't seem easily intimidated." "I'm actually terrified," she said without thinking, "but I try not to lead with that." The smallest flicker, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something human. He gestured lightly toward her blouse. "Coffee." She looked down, heat flooding her cheeks. "Yes. This morning decided to attack me. Did it win? I'm still here," she said. "So I guess not yet." Something in his expression softened almost curiosity. He studied her as though trying to solve a puzzle he didn't expect to find interesting, but now couldn't ignore. "Tell me," he said after a moment, "why should I consider you for a position at Drake Innovations?" Her first instinct was to say the safe thing. "I'm hardworking, passionate, a team player." But the truth hung heavier in her throat. "Because I care," she said finally, "about what people feel when they see a brand. When they use something we've made, I care about meaning." "Meaning?" he repeated. "Yes." She said, "You can have the best campaign in the world, but if it doesn't mean something real, it dies the moment the ad stops playing." He didn't respond, but his gaze had changed, less testing, more listening. For the first time that morning, Clara exhaled without shaking. Then came the sound, a short, sharp buzz from the intercom. "Mr. Drake," a voice said. "Your 10:30 call is on hold." Clara blinked. "Mr. Drake." He pressed the button. "Tell them I'll call back." Her pulse stumbled. "Mr. Drake. Ethan Drake." The name she'd seen printed on the building's front wall, in silvered letters taller than she was. The man everyone in Boston's business circle whispered about, the visionary, the perfectionist, the one people feared to disappoint. And she had just told him life happens every day. "Oh," she said faintly. "You're the CEO?" He tilted his head, a dry amusement glinting in his eyes. "Was that not clear? I thought." She stopped. "I thought I was meeting HR. You are," he said, "in a way." He walked back to the window, the skyline painting his outline in pale blue light. "I like to know who's being hired. It saves time later." Clara tried to swallow the lump in her throat. "I'm sorry if I spoke out of turn." He turned halfway, one eyebrow raised. "Would you prefer to take it back?" She hesitated. "No." His eyes lingered on her for a long moment, then something like approval flickered through. "Good," for a heartbeat. They just stood in that fragile space, her hands clasped tightly on her lap, his reflection merging with the city beyond the glass. Then he walked toward her, extending his hand. "Ethan Drake." She rose quickly, nerves tangling her movements. Her palm was still damp from the tissue she'd used earlier. She reached out, and in her rush, her bag strap slipped from her shoulder, swinging straight into his arm. The sound was sharp. Her hand, reflexively, jerked up and landed squarely against his wrist with a soft smack. Silence. Her mouth fell open. "Oh my God. I didn't mean..." He looked down at his wrist, then back up at her. His eyes, unreadable for a moment, then softened into something she didn't expect at all. A quiet chuckle escaped him, low, genuine, almost warm. "Finally," he said, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Someone with courage." Clara froze, halfway between horror and disbelief. He straightened the sleeve of his suit, entirely unbothered. "Let's reschedule this interview," he said calmly. "Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Don't be late." And before she could reply, he was already at the door, pausing just long enough to glance over his shoulder. "Oh, and Ms. Monroe." She looked up. "Next time," he said, "aim for a handshake." The door clicked shut behind him. For a long moment, Clara just stood there, her pulse loud, her face warm, her coffee stain forgotten. Then, softly, she laughed, not because it was funny, but because maybe, just maybe, being late wasn't the worst thing that had happened today. Clara sat frozen for a few seconds after he left, the echo of the door clicking shut, hanging in the air like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Her palm still tingled from where it had met his wrist. And her heart, well, that had apparently decided to live in her throat now. She blinked once, twice, then whispered to the empty room. Courage, really. The rain outside had turned from mist to drizzle again, tracing soft rivers down the tall glass panes. For a moment she just stood there, trying to remember how to breathe. Then, slowly, the absurdity of it all broke through. She'd shown up late, spilled coffee, and hit the CEO of one of the biggest firms in Boston, and somehow hadn't been escorted out by security. Maybe the universe was just having a laugh. The next morning, she almost didn't come back, but when she found herself standing once more in the building's sleek lobby, hair tied neatly, blouse a soft powder blue this time, something in her chest whispered, "See it through." The receptionist, Melissa, looked mildly surprised to see her. "You again, apparently," Clara said with a small smile. "Mr. Drake asked me to return." Melissa's eyebrows lifted a fraction, but she said nothing, pressing the call button for the elevator. Clara smoothed her skirt with damp palms. Her pulse steadying with each floor, the elevator climbed. When the doors opened, Ethan Drake was already there, leaning against the edge of his desk, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the morning light slicing across his face. He looked up, and the faintest smile flickered. "Right on time," he said. "I thought you might reconsider." Clara met his gaze. "I did, and I came anyway." His expression didn't change, but something in the room warmed, or maybe that was just her. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Yesterday was unconventional. "That's one way to describe it," she murmured. He almost smiled again. "You surprise me, Ms. Monroe." "I get that a lot, usually right before I get fired." The line slipped out before she could stop it, but instead of the sharp reprimand she expected, Ethan chuckled quietly. "Tell me something," he said. "When you spoke about meaning yesterday, did you mean that? Or was it just interview talk?" "I meant it," she said simply. "People don't buy perfection. They buy connection. If something feels honest, they trust it. If it's all polish and slogans, they scroll past it." He leaned back slightly, watching her as if the room had suddenly turned into an observation deck. "So, you're saying authenticity sells?" "No," she said softly. "I'm saying authenticity matters. The selling comes after." For a moment, the rain and city noise outside faded. It was just her voice, calm, steady, and his attention, focused entirely on her. Then he spoke, quieter now. "Do you know how rare it is for someone to talk to me like that? Probably the same as someone slapping you during an interview," she said without thinking, and immediately bit her tongue. Ethan's laugh this time was real low and warm, curling through the room like smoke. "Touché." He rose, walking toward the window again, hands in his pockets. "This company was built on precision," he said. "Control. My father used to say emotion had no place in business." "And do you believe that she asked?" He turned slightly, eyes unreadable. "I used to." There was a pause, quiet but heavy. "Maybe I still do." Clara studied him the way his shoulders stayed squared, even when he was thinking, the faint crease between his brows when something bothered him. She wondered if anyone had ever told him he didn't have to be perfect all the time. "Maybe control isn't the opposite of emotion," she said. "Maybe it's just fear, dressed up nicely." He looked at her again, this time longer. "You speak very freely." "I was raised to be polite," she said, "but I also learned that silence doesn't always save you." He seemed to consider that. The tension between them, once sharp, had shifted into something quieter, layered, almost human. Ethan walked back toward his desk. "What would you do?" he asked. "If you were in charge of how this company presents itself to the world?" She blinked. "In charge, hypothetically?" Clara thought for a moment, glancing around at the minimalist office glass. "Chrome, everything perfect." "I'd show the cracks," she said. "The people behind the numbers, the late nights, the small wins, the humanity you hide, the humanity I hide," he repeated, his voice softer. "Yes," she said, "because if you don't show it, someone else will, and they won't be as kind." For a long moment, he didn't say anything. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice. Then he extended his hand across the desk. "Let's test your theory." Clara hesitated. "You mean director of strategic branding," he said simply. "If you're going to talk about authenticity, let's see if you can build it." Her mouth opened, closed. I don't even." "You start Monday," he interrupted. "You'll report directly to me, Mr. Drake." I don't think he tilted his head. "Didn't you say life happens every day?" She blinked, caught between disbelief and a laugh that couldn't quite form. His hand was still there, steady. She reached for it cautiously, this time determined not to repeat yesterday's disaster. Her palm brushed his, the warmth surprising her. For 1 second, the world went still. Then, because life has a sense of humor, the corner of her notebook slipped from the desk, bumping her elbow, and her hand jerked again, a light tap this time against his wrist. They both froze, a silence, then a shared breath, half awkward, half amused. Ethan's eyes flicked down, then up again, and his voice came out low, a faint smile in it. "Finally," he said, echoing himself with quiet irony, "someone with courage." Clara's cheeks warmed. "I'm starting to think you enjoy being assaulted, only when it's accidental." His tone was dry, his smile small but unmistakable. She stepped back, shaking her head, half laughing, half mortified. "You're unbelievable." "So I've been told," he replied. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight slipped between the clouds, touching the edge of the window in a soft gold glow. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan said, almost gently, "You'll need a badge, an assistant, and probably a good dry cleaner. For the coffee or the chaos." "Both," he said. "Consider them part of the job." Clara looked at him. This man who'd gone from interrogator to something else entirely, and felt an unexpected calm settle over her. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was something deeper. When she finally found her voice, it came out barely above a whisper. "Director of Strategic Branding," she repeated. He nodded once, already reaching for another file. "Congratulations, Ms. Monroe. Try not to slap anyone on your first day." She smiled, a quiet, disbelieving smile, and turned toward the door. Her reflection in the glass looked the same, but inside, something had shifted. She didn't know what it meant yet, only that this, whatever this was, had just begun. She still couldn't believe it. Being late had changed everything. The city was still waking when Clara stepped out of the cab, clutching her coffee like a lifeline. The morning air carried that crisp Boston chill, half wind, half anticipation, the kind that made people walk faster and dream a little bigger. Monday, her first day as director of strategic branding. Even saying the title in her head felt unreal, like trying on clothes that didn't quite belong to her yet. The glass doors of Drake Innovations gleamed in the early light. She caught her reflection for a brief second, hair neatly pinned, blouse pressed, nerves barely hidden beneath a calm smile. "Don't trip, don't spill, don't faint," she whispered under her breath, stepping inside. The lobby was quieter than she remembered, humming softly with the sound of coffee machines and elevator chimes. A young assistant with bright eyes and faster hands appeared at the desk. "Ms. Monroe?" "Good morning. I'm Jenna from HR. Mr. Drake asked me to show you around before your orientation." "Mr. Drake?" Just hearing his name stirred a flicker in her chest. She pushed it down, nodding politely. "Lead the way." They walked through corridors of glass and steel. Everything sleek and modern, all clean lines and quiet power. The place smelled faintly of citrus and ambition. Every step echoed. Clara noticed how the employees spoke in low, efficient tones, their faces lit by screens and purpose. Jenna smiled as they walked. "You'll be on the executive floor, right next to Ms. Cooper, our COO. She's something else." "Something else?" Jenna grinned. "You'll see." When they reached the 24th floor, the air felt different, cooler, heavier somehow. The view stretched across the Charles River, silver and wide beneath the morning sun. At the end of the hallway stood a woman in her mid-50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes, holding a tablet like it was an extension of her hand. "Ms. Monroe," she said, voice firm but not unkind. "Helen Cooper." Clara offered a handshake. Helen's grip was steady, grounding. "Welcome aboard. Ethan told me about your unique interview." There it was, the word unique hanging like a polite secret. Clara forced a smile. "I suppose that's one way to describe it." Helen's lips curved. "Relax. Around here, if you survive the first week, you're already ahead of most." They began the tour from the open creative labs to the marketing bullpen, buzzing with half-finished ideas. Clara listened, nodded, tried to absorb names and faces that blurred together like pages in fast motion. Everywhere she went, she felt eyes follow her, curious, cautious, whispering. By the time they reached her office, a smaller glass-walled space beside Ethan's, she could feel the rumor before she even heard it. A pair of analysts near the break room spoke in low tones. That's her, right. The one who slapped him. Yeah. They say he thanked her for it. Unreal. No one else even looks him in the eye. And she... The voices trailed off when they noticed her passing. Clara pretended not to hear, though her stomach tightened. She set her bag down on her new desk, exhaling quietly. The chair was too soft, the silence too sharp. Helen appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes thoughtful. Ignore them. This place feeds on gossip. I'm not worried, Clara said, though her voice betrayed a hint of something else. Helen smiled knowingly. You should be, but not about that. She stepped inside, glancing out toward the hall. Ethan doesn't hand out titles like candy. He saw something in you. Don't make the mistake of underestimating that. Clara looked at her, surprised. You sound like you approve. Helen chuckled softly. Let's say I've learned to recognize survivors. And you, Ms. Monroe. Have that look someone who's been underestimated too many times to count. The words landed somewhere deep, unexpected. Clara managed a smile. Then I'll try not to prove you wrong. Good, Helen said. Your first team meeting's in an hour. And one more thing, bring your honesty. But use it wisely. Courage gets you through the door, tact keeps you inside. Then she was gone, her heels clicking down the hall like a metronome. For a while, Clara just stood there, looking out over the city. The skyline shimmered in pale light, glass towers reflecting one another in endless repetition. She wondered how many people down there had ever felt this mix of fear and hope of walking into a room where no one believed you belonged. She opened her laptop, breathing through the swirl of thoughts. New battlefield, she thought. Same heart. When the meeting began, the room buzzed with low voices. The creative lead sat in a semicircle, sleek slides projected on the wall. Ethan wasn't there, but his presence was in every cautious word, every tightly measured tone. Helen introduced her briefly, her words crisp. This is Clara Monroe, our new director of strategic branding. She'll be spearheading a company-wide refresh. The word refresh made a few eyebrows rise. Clara smiled politely, feeling the quiet weight of skepticism settle over her like mist. She could almost hear their thoughts. Who is she? How did she get here when the presentation started? Clara took notes not on numbers, but on faces. The nervous laugh of the junior designer, the careful phrasing of the marketing lead, the exhaustion in the eyes of the copywriter who hadn't been heard in months. The company was brilliant, but brittle. Every smile was professional, not personal. When her turn came to speak, she stood slowly, adjusting her blazer. Before I say anything, she began. I just want to make one thing clear. The room quieted. Yes, the rumor's true. I slapped the CEO. A ripple of laughter broke through the tension, half shock, half relief. Clara smiled. Accidentally, she added, and somehow, he still hired me. So, I figured the least I can do is earn it. The laughter deepened, the ice melting a little. Even Helen's mouth twitched. Clara continued, her tone steady. What I want to build here isn't just campaigns. It's trust. People outside this building should see something real when they see Drake Innovations. Not just perfect, real. The silence that followed wasn't skeptical this time. It was curious, listening. When the meeting ended, Helen pulled her aside. You handled that well, she said. You've got a room full of cynics starting to wonder if hope's contagious. Clara grinned, the tension easing from her shoulders. Then I guess I did my job. As she left the conference room, she caught sight of Ethan at the far end of the hallway, watching quietly from behind the glass. Their eyes met just for a second, and something unspoken passed between them. Not approval, not challenge. Something in between. By the time she reached her desk, her pulse had steadied. The whispers had quieted. Boston sunlight poured through the window, touching the rim of her coffee cup. Clara sat back, letting the warmth reach her face. She still didn't know if she belonged here, but for the first time, it didn't matter. Somewhere deep down, she believed she could, and that was enough for now. The hum of the office was constant low, efficient, polite. It filled every corner of Drake Innovations like background music that never changed key. The place ran on precision meetings starting on the minute. Emails replied to before they could even cool. Every desk spotless. Every sentence measured. You could almost taste the restraint in the air. Clara noticed it on her third week, the stillness between conversations. The way laughter died too quickly, like people remembered mid-sound that someone might be listening. Everyone was brilliant here, degrees on walls, trophies in glass cases, but something vital was missing. Warmth, spontaneity, the kind of human messiness that made a workplace feel alive. She'd seen it in their eyes, that mix of admiration and fear whenever Ethan Drake walked past. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. The weight of his silence was enough. People straightened their backs, fixed their tones, polished their words before speaking. It was a company built on excellence and anxiety. Sometimes she'd catch him in the hallway, a flash of gray suit and focus. He'd nod politely, that controlled half-smile, and she'd feel an odd mix of pride and discomfort. Because while his approval was rare, it was also dangerous, too sharp, too bright. Clara tried to bridge the gap in small ways. She learned the names of the janitorial staff, the interns, the quiet engineers who sat near the windows. She left thank you notes on desks after late-night projects. She brought in muffins one Friday morning, warm, blueberry, homemade. The surprise on their faces told her everything she needed to know. No one did that here. By noon, the muffins were gone. But for a few hours, the air had shifted lighter somehow. People smiled without looking over their shoulders first. That's when she met him, Ryan Drake. He appeared at her office door unannounced, leaning casually against the frame, tie loosened, charm turned all the way up. "So, you're the infamous Clara Monroe," he said, grinning. "The woman who slapped my brother." Her pen froze mid-line. Word travels fast. In this place, it travels faster than truth. He stepped inside, uninvited but effortless. His resemblance to Ethan was unmistakable, same sharp jaw, same steel gray eyes, but where Ethan was composed, Ryan was motion, laughter in his tone, mischief in his stance. "I'm head of product," he said, dropping into the chair across from her. "And you, apparently, are the new miracle hire." "I think the word was experiment," she said dryly. He laughed, low and easy. "I like you already." Clara smiled politely, trying to gauge the ground beneath her feet. Ryan had that kind of charm that drew people in, but also warned them quietly, "Don't fall too far." "What brings you to my office? Curiosity?" he said, leaning forward. "I wanted to meet the woman who made Ethan laugh. That's practically a company holiday." She couldn't help it. She laughed. Just once. It wasn't exactly planned. "Neither are the best things," he said, eyes glinting. "Tell me, did he glare first, or go straight to impressed?" "I'm not sure," she said, remembering the quiet moment in his office, that flicker of amusement breaking through the ice. "Maybe both." Ryan grinned wider. "Sounds like him." Something in his tone shifted then, softer, almost wistful. He used to laugh more. "You know, Before the board, before the image, now he's all marble and mirrors. Clara tilted her head. And you? He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I prefer glass. You can see through it, but it cracks easier. Before she could respond, a shadow moved past the doorway. Ethan? He paused for the briefest second, eyes flicking from his brother to Clara, unreadable. Then, with a polite nod, he continued down the hall. The silence that followed felt colder somehow. Ryan leaned back, crossing his arms. See? That look right there? That's how he runs this place, all observation. No confession? Maybe that's how he survives, Clara said quietly. Ryan watched her for a moment, curiosity softening his grin. You defend him? I understand him, she corrected. There's a difference. He smiled again, but this time it was smaller. Careful. Ms. Monroe. Understanding a Drake has consequences. She didn't answer, just met his gaze until he looked away first. After he left, she found herself standing by the window, looking down at the city below. Boston stretched wide and gray, rain gathering again on the rooftops. Reflections overlapped in the glass, her own face, the clouds, and faintly behind her, Ethan walking past, phone pressed to his ear, expression unreadable. He didn't look in, but somehow she felt it anyway, the awareness of being seen, even when unseen. That evening, she stayed late, reviewing campaign drafts. The office emptied around her, the silence deep enough to hear the soft hum of the air vents. She rubbed her temples, eyes heavy, when a voice broke the stillness. You work late. She turned. Ethan stood in the doorway. No jacket, tie gone. He looked almost human in the half-light. Trying to catch up? She said. He nodded, stepping inside. I saw the staff engagement survey. Scores are up. I assume that's you. I just listened. She said, people want to feel seen. He studied her a moment, that quiet intensity that always made her want to fill the silence but never dared. That's harder to do than it sounds, he said. Not if you mean it. Their eyes met steady, searching. Something unspoken lingered, like the pause before a storm. He broke it first. My brother stopped by your office today. Yes, she said carefully. He likes to test people. I noticed. Don't let him, Ethan said, his tone gentle but firm. She smiled faintly. You mean, don't let him charm me? I mean, don't let him distract you. The warning was quiet but deliberate. Then he straightened, adjusting his cuffs like closing a conversation. Good night, Ms. Monroe. Good night, Mr. Drake. When he left, she sat in the dim glow of her monitor for a long while, the city lights flickering beyond the glass. The hum of the office had faded, but the echo of his words remained. A company built on ice, she thought. But even ice changes shape when you stand long enough in the warmth. She didn't know it yet, but she had already begun to thaw at one quiet kindness at a time. The boardroom gleamed like every other part of Drake Innovations, sleek, spotless, unyielding. Sunlight poured in through the high windows, bouncing off the polished table. Too bright, too sharp. Clara sat near the middle, her folder open, her heart beating just loud enough for her to hear. Around her, a circle of executives shuffled notes and adjusted ties, faces smooth as marble. Ethan sat at the head, calm, composed, unreadable. Her presentation sat on the big screen, bold colors, raw images, real people, not actors, not models, warehouse workers, engineers, janitors, interns. She'd called it the human side of innovation. It was everything this company didn't show. She stood. Her palms were cold. We talk about changing the world, she began softly. But the world doesn't connect to perfection. It connects to honesty, to the cracks, the fingerprints, the real stories behind the glass. She clicked through slides, faces smiling in break rooms, sketches on napkins, late-night teamwork under flickering lights. "This is who we are," she said. "Not just what we sell." A long silence. Then the first voice, too sentimental, another unprofessional, a third. "It risks diluting the brand." Clara's throat tightened, but she kept her posture. "Our brand is people," she said. "We can't keep pretending we're made of steel." One man leaned back, smirking. "With all due respect, Ms. Monroe, emotion doesn't sell in tech." She met his eyes, steady. "Then maybe we're selling it wrong." A few quiet chuckles, the polite kind, half amusement, half dismissal. She caught Helen's gaze across the table. Helen's expression was neutral, but her eyes, they told her to keep going. Ethan had been silent the entire time, hands folded, watching. His gaze never left her face, not even as the room began to shift against her. Finally, he spoke. "So, your strategy," he said slowly, "is vulnerability." Clara hesitated. "My strategy is connection." He leaned forward. "And you believe people want that from us?" "Yes," she said. "They don't want another perfect product. They want proof that the people making it understand what it means to be human." The air in the room seemed to tighten. Ethan's tone stayed calm. But there was a new edge. "We've spent years building trust through consistency. You'd trade that for imperfection." Clara's voice stayed soft, but it didn't waver. "Consistency isn't trust, Mr. Drake. It's comfort. They're not the same thing." A murmur moved through the room. Helen shifted in her seat, hiding a small, knowing smile. Ethan stood, walking to the window, hands in his pockets. The skyline reflected across the glass, Boston stretching wide and cold. "You're asking me," he said quietly, "to risk the reputation of this company on a feeling?" "I'm asking you," Clara replied, "to remember why you built it in the first place." He turned then, his eyes sharp, almost too sharp. "Careful. Ms. Monroe." She swallowed. "You hired me for honesty. I hired you for results." For a moment, they just stared at each other, the room forgotten. The city humming quietly beyond the glass. She could feel everyone watching, the invisible current between admiration and danger. Helen cleared her throat, breaking the tension. "Maybe," she said, "we test the idea first. A pilot campaign. Small scale. If it fails, no harm done." Ethan looked at her. "You agree with her?" Helen smiled, dry and deliberate. "I agree that sometimes courage deserves data." He studied them both, then turned back to the table. "We'll reconvene in 48 hours. Bring me numbers, not sentiment." His tone was final, but his gaze lingered on Clara a fraction too long before he walked out. When the room emptied, Helen stayed behind. She approached quietly, her heels clicking softly on the floor. "You held your ground," she said. "I'm not sure it mattered," Clara murmured, collecting her notes. "It mattered to him," Helen said, "and that's precisely why it scared him." Clara looked up. "Scared him." Helen smiled faintly. "Ethan built this empire by controlling every variable. You just reminded him there are some he can't." Her words hung in the air like a truth neither of them wanted to say louder. Later that evening, Clara sat at her desk, lights low, the office mostly empty. The city glowed outside, gold spilling over the river. Her presentation still open on her laptop, the faces, the light, the imperfections. She traced one of the photos with her finger, an engineer laughing, coffee stain on his sleeve, real, human. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. "You stayed late," Ethan said quietly. "So did you," she replied. He stepped closer, the faint scent of rain and cedar trailing him. "You challenged me in front of my entire board today. I know. That doesn't usually go well for people." "Then why am I still here?" she asked, turning to face him. He exhaled almost a laugh. "But not quite. I'm still deciding." Her lips curved slightly. That's fair. For a moment, silence. Just the soft hum of the city beyond the glass. Ethan leaned against the edge of her desk, studying the open slides. You really believe this could work? Yes. You're willing to risk your job on it? Yes. He nodded slowly. You're either brave or reckless. Probably both. That made him smile. Just a little. You remind me of the version of myself I liked better. Clara blinked. I didn't think you had one. Neither did I, he said quietly. He stood then, straightening his cuffs, the armor sliding back into place. We'll discuss it again Wednesday. As he reached the door, she said softly, It's not weakness to show heart. Ethan, he paused. The sound of his name, not Mr. Drake lingered like warmth in cold air. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, almost thoughtful. Maybe not, but it changes who holds the power. Then he was gone. The office fell silent again. Clara looked back at the city lights' reflections blurring across the window, like emotions she couldn't quite name. Somewhere deep inside, she knew something had shifted between them. Not just disagreement, something deeper, respect, curiosity, maybe even fear. And as for Ethan Drake, alone in his car later that night, he replayed her words over and over, the cadence of them steady, unwavering. It's not weakness to show heart. He didn't know why that single sentence unsettled him so much. Maybe because it was true, maybe because it came from her, and maybe because, for the first time in years, he wasn't entirely sure who was in control. The first rumor arrived quietly the way rumors always do. A whisper in the hallway. A smile held a second too long. By the end of the week, it had a rhythm, a shape, a life of its own. She got promoted because she slapped him. Not for her work, not for her vision, just because she slapped the CEO. It started near the elevators, spread through the design floor, and settled like dust on every surface she touched. Clara could feel it in the air, that subtle pause when she entered a room, the two bright greetings, the way voices lowered just as she passed. At first, she tried to laugh it off. People talked. That's what offices did. She told herself it didn't matter. But at night, when she sat at her desk long after everyone had gone, the words crept back in. She got lucky. She's just a story they tell now. Helen noticed first. You're quieter, she said one afternoon, leaning against the doorframe of Clara's office. That's not like you. Clara forced a smile. Just focused. Helen's look was sharp, motherly. Ignore the noise. It fades when you produce results. I know. Then act like you do. Helen left her with that. Tough love wrapped in truth. But the noise didn't fade. It grew. Even Ryan, with his easy grin and too much charm, couldn't resist adding to it. He showed up at her desk one morning, coffee in hand, mischief in his eyes. So, he said casually, is it true what they say? Depends on what they're saying, she replied, not looking up from her screen. That you landed this job with one well-aimed slap. Clara's fingers paused over the keyboard. And here I thought my resume was impressive enough. Ryan chuckled, sitting on the edge of her desk. Come on, I'm just teasing. You have to admit, it's a hell of a story. Stories are fine, she said. Until they start replacing facts. He tilted his head, studying her. Facts are boring. Clara. Stories make people pay attention. She looked up then, meeting his eyes. Then maybe it's time they paid attention to something real. He smiled, but there was something else in it, a flicker of challenge. Be careful, director. Around here, truth doesn't always win. He left her with that, the scent of coffee and arrogance lingering behind him. That afternoon, she walked through the open office rows of brilliant people typing quietly, heads down, voices polite. She could feel the weight of perception pressing against her. Every compliment carried a question, every smile a shadow. She wanted to shout, I earned this, I fought for it, but that wasn't her way. So, she listened, she observed, and then she began to build. She pulled her team together, the young designer with more talent than confidence, the data analyst no one ever asked for opinions, the shy copywriter who wrote truth in drafts and erased it before anyone saw. "We're going to change how this company speaks," she said. "We'll make people feel again." They blinked at her, uncertain. With what someone asked, "Honesty," she said simply. "Real voices, real stories." It started small. A short video series featuring employees talking about their first failures. A blog about innovation that included mistakes as milestones. A photo campaign showing the faces behind the code, the production lines, the late nights. The first week, no one noticed. The second week, people started sharing. By the third, clients called asking who was behind it. But inside the company, the whispers still circled. They called her ideas too soft, too risky. They called her passion unorthodox. And every time she heard her name paired with a slap, something inside her went still. One evening, she stayed late again. The building was quiet except for the sound of rain against the windows, that familiar, forgiving rhythm. She walked down the hallway toward the lobby, heels echoing softly. And there he was, Ethan, standing by the window, phone in hand, gaze somewhere far beyond the city lights. He didn't see her at first. For a second, she watched him, the perfect posture, the solitude wrapped around him like armor, the man everyone admired but no one really knew. When he finally turned, their eyes met. "Working late again," he said, voice low. "Trying to prove I'm worth keeping," she replied, half a joke, half truth. His brow furrowed. "You think that's in question?" "I think everything's in question lately." He studied her a moment, then said quietly, "Don't waste time on gossip. The people who talk the most do the least." She nodded but didn't answer. He stepped closer, the faint reflection of both of them merging in the glass. "You're changing things here. Clara, that's uncomfortable for people. It always is." "Even for you?" she asked before she could stop herself. His eyes softened. "Especially for me." They stood there in silence for a moment, the rain a thin silver curtain between them and the city below. When she left the building that night, she felt lighter, not because the rumors had stopped, but because she finally knew how to silence them, not with words, with proof. The next morning, she walked into the office before sunrise, coffee in hand, determination in every step. She pinned new drafts on the whiteboard, reworked timelines, and called her team in early. They worked until dusk. They argued, rewrote, laughed, cursed, and started again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was hers. By the end of the week, she looked around the room at the tired faces, the quiet pride, and knew she'd done something that mattered. The whispers would keep coming. That was fine, because when the work spoke for itself, no rumor could outlive it. She closed her laptop, leaned back in her chair, and let the hum of the office fade into evening stillness. Her reflection in the glass smiled back, calm, resolute. "They'll remember my work," she whispered, "not my mistake." The email came just after 7 short, precise, unmistakably his. Dinner work related, Beacon Hill, 8:30. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. Ethan Drake had a way of making even 4 words sound like a command and a question at once. Clara stared at the screen, heart caught somewhere between curiosity and nerves. Dinner, work-related, that could mean anything: strategy, crisis, damage control, or maybe nothing at all. She almost typed "sure," then deleted it. Finally, she wrote, "See you there." The restaurant was small, tucked on a quiet corner where the streetlights softened the edges of everything. Inside, it smelled of basil, garlic, and something sweet baking in the oven. The walls were brick, the light golden, the kind that made strangers look familiar. He was already there, sitting near the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled, for once. He didn't look like the CEO of an empire, more like a man trying to remember what it felt like to breathe. "Clara," he said as she approached, standing slightly. "Thank you for coming. You didn't give me much choice," she said lightly. He smiled. True. They sat. A waiter appeared, all polite warmth and Italian accent. Ethan ordered wine. She asked for water. The moment stretched, easy but strange. "So," she said after a pause. "Work-related." He looked at her, then really looked. It was supposed to be, "I changed my mind." That startled her more than she wanted to admit. "You changed your mind about a lot of things lately," he said, eyes on the candle flickering between them, "including how to talk to people who aren't afraid to tell me the truth." She smiled softly. "That's a very specific group. Exactly one person, actually." The waiter returned with fresh bread. They talked about projects first, the campaign, the numbers, the cautious optimism from the board. But the conversation drifted easily, like it had been waiting to happen, from work to childhood to everything in between. He told her about his father, a man who believed control was the only kind of strength, how he'd spent years trying to live up to that image until he realized it had turned him into stone. She told him about her mother, a waitress who worked double shifts and still managed to laugh at night, how she taught her that dignity wasn't about having everything, but about showing up anyway. For a while, the restaurant noise faded. It was just their voices, overlapping softly, two lives unfolding across a table. Ethan leaned back, studying her. "You know, you're nothing like what I expected, good or bad." "Unexpected," he said, "and inconvenient." She laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should." The way he said it made her chest tighten quiet, unguarded, honest. The air between them changed, not louder, just closer. They ate slowly. He reached for the wine bottle, poured her a glass without asking. "You don't drink much," he said. "Only when I need courage. Do you need it now?" She met his gaze, maybe a beat of silence. The candlelight trembled slightly, catching the gold in her eyes. Outside, rain had begun light, patient, the kind that softened the world rather than soaked it. When the plates were cleared, neither seemed in a hurry to leave. "Do you ever get tired," she asked quietly, "of what? Being perfect all the time?" He gave a small, almost surprised laugh. "You think I'm perfect? I think you try too hard not to be human." He looked down, smile fading. "If I stop trying, everything falls apart. Or maybe it finally starts to make sense." Their eyes met again, steady this time, no laughter, no guard, just the quiet recognition of two people who saw through each other's masks. When they finally stepped outside, the night was cool and damp. The street glowed puddles reflecting the yellow lamps, the city humming low in the distance. Ethan held the door for her, his hand brushing hers just slightly. The contact was brief, accidental, but it lingered. They stood there for a moment, both looking at nothing in particular. "Thank you for coming," he said again, softer this time. "For dinner, for not running," he said. She smiled, tilting her umbrella against the drizzle. "You make it sound like I had a choice." "You did," he said. "You always do." She hesitated, searching for a reply, but the words didn't come. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was alive, fragile, and new. He stepped a little closer. The rain made small rings on the pavement, steady as heartbeats. For a second, it felt like the whole world had gone quiet. Just him, her, and the glow of a single streetlight bending through the mist. He reached up, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. His touch was light, uncertain, the kind that asks permission rather than assumes it. She didn't move. Then, slowly, he leaned in. The kiss was soft, not a declaration, but a question, and she answered without words. When they pulled back, they both smiled small, surprised, a little breathless. The rain kept falling, steady and kind. Clara looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Was this still work-related?" Ethan smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. "I'll file it under research." She laughed, shaking her head, the sound warm against the night. As they walked in opposite directions, the city lights blurred through the rain. Neither of them looked back, but both knew something had shifted, quietly, irreversibly. It hit her before the coffee did. The buzz of her phone, sharp against the quiet morning. One notification, then 5, then 20. She frowned, half awake, reaching for the screen. And there it was. Her face, his face, caught mid-kiss under a Beacon Hill streetlight. The caption read, "Fast track to the top." Her stomach dropped. For a moment, the world went soundless, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and her own heartbeat. She read it again, as if the words might change. They didn't. By the time she reached the office, the storm had already broken. Screens glowed with whispers. Desks that used to greet her with polite smiles now offered silence, the kind that followed scandal. HR moved like a small army through the hallways. Ethan's assistant found her before she'd even set her bag down. "He wants to see you," she said softly. The elevator ride felt endless. The hum of the cables above her sounded like static. When the doors opened, his office was already filled. HR head, legal counsel, and Helen. Calm as ever, leaning against the window like she'd seen this movie before. Ethan stood behind his desk, jaw tight, phone in hand. His voice was low but dangerous. "Find out who posted it," he said into the receiver. Now, he hung up, looked at Clara, and for a fleeting moment, the anger softened just enough to show the hurt underneath. "I'm sorry." She started. He shook his head. "Don't. You did nothing wrong." The HR director cleared her throat. "Mr. Drake, we still have to discuss the optics." Ethan's eyes snapped to her. "Optics? That's your concern right now." "With respect," the woman said carefully. "This affects perception internally and externally. There's already chatter on the investor boards. We need a statement." Clara stood still, hands folded, the room spinning quietly around her. Her photograph, her mistake. No, not a mistake a moment, but now it was weaponized. Helen finally spoke, her tone calm, almost measured. "We'll handle this with grace," she said. "Panic helps no one." Ethan turned to her. "Grace won't stop the bleeding. Neither will rage," Helen replied. "Sit down before you say something you'll regret." He stared at her for a beat, then exhaled, the fight leaving him in fragments. "Who took that photo?" "No one knows yet," Helen said. "Could have been anyone with a phone." He looked at Clara again, not as her boss, not as a CEO, but as a man watching the one decent thing in his life get dragged through mud. "You shouldn't have to face this," he said quietly. She straightened. "I'm part of it, Ethan. I will face it." The use of his name made everyone else in the room pause. HR exchanged looks, legal scribbled notes. Helen almost smiled. Ethan dismissed the room with a glance. Everyone out. When they were gone, the silence between them was sharp enough to cut through. He walked to the window, back to her. "They'll twist it," he said. "They'll make it a story about power and advantage." "Then we tell a different story," she said softly. He turned, surprised. "What not with statements, with truth. You can't erase it, so own it. Be transparent. Let them see we're human, that this wasn't manipulation or politics." He almost laughed a short, disbelieving sound. "You think honesty will fix this? I think hiding will destroy it," she said. He studied her, the same way he did in that first interview, testing the edges of her courage. "You realize this could end your career?" "Maybe," she said. But silence would end something bigger. He didn't answer. Just watched her, the woman who had walked into his life late. Flustered and unafraid to tell him the truth. Helen reappeared in the doorway, folder in hand. "Investors are calling. HR wants a statement draft within the hour." Ethan rubbed his temples. "Not yet." Helen raised an eyebrow. If you wait too long, others will control the narrative. Clara spoke before he could. Then let me write it. Both of them looked at her. I started the culture campaign. She continued. I know our voice. Let me be the one to speak it. Helen nodded slowly, eyes glinting. That might just work. Ethan hesitated. No, you're not taking the fall for this. I'm not taking the fall, she said. I'm setting the tone. He looked at her for a long time, then finally, quietly, you really don't scare easily, do you? Only when it matters, she said. Helen smiled faintly. You two have 10 minutes before the next call. Make them count. Then she left them alone again. Clara sat at the small table by the window, laptop open. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Words mattered now. They could heal or they could ignite. She chose both. She typed slowly, deliberately. We made a mistake not in feeling, but in underestimating how visible honesty can be. At Drake Innovations, we've built a culture of transparency and trust. Today, that trust starts with us. When she read it aloud, Ethan's expression softened. That's good, he said quietly. Too good. They'll see right through it. Maybe that's the point. The storm outside the windows matched the one inside the building, a gray, restless churn. Messages flew across screens. Investors demanded explanations. Employees whispered. The photo, though deleted from the board, lived on in screenshots and group chats. But through it all, she stayed still, grounded, because panic would only prove the story right. Helen stopped by before heading home. They're waiting for blood, she said, glancing at both of them. Don't give them any. Handle this with grace, or you'll both drown. After she left, the office grew quiet again. The city lights flickered against the glass, distorted by rain. Clara stood, walking toward the window. Do you regret it? She asked. Ethan's voice came from behind her, steady, low. The kiss? She nodded. He paused. Only that someone stole it from us. She turned slightly, meeting his eyes. There was no pretense left in either of them, just fatigue, fear, and something deeper still. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the silence was fragile but unbroken. They both knew tomorrow would be chaos. But for now, in that still moment between storm and consequence, it was just them, two people standing in the wreckage of truth, learning that sometimes courage doesn't look like fighting. Sometimes it looks like staying. The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning, the kind of cold that didn't come from air conditioning, but from judgment. 12 faces lined the long mahogany table, their expressions a careful blend of disappointment and calculation. Screens flickered with financial updates that no one was actually looking at. And at the center of it all, Ethan and Clara. Ethan stood near the end of the table, jaw set, hands clasped behind his back. He'd faced tougher rooms before investors, politicians, even lawsuits, but never one that cut this close. Clara sat beside him, composed but pale, her notebook open, though she hadn't written a word. The chairwoman spoke first, her voice clipped, practiced. Mr. Drake, we've reviewed the events of the last 48 hours. The photo, the circulation, the chatter online. We have to discuss the reputational risk this poses. Ethan's voice was calm, too calm. There was no breach of conduct, perhaps not legally, another board member said. But ethically, that's a different story. A CEO engaging in a personal relationship with a direct report raises concerns. The press won't care about nuance. A third voice chimed in, a man whose name Clara couldn't even remember, but whose tone she'd never forget. The optics are disastrous. We're already fielding calls from partners asking if Drake Innovations has become a soap opera. Laughter rippled through the room, polite, restrained, cutting. Clara felt heat rise in her chest, but she stayed silent. Ethan's hand tightened briefly on the back of her chair. A silent don't. She should resign, someone said flatly. It would be cleaner, The word hung there. Resign. Ethan's voice came low and dangerous. Absolutely not. Ethan, she did nothing wrong, he cut in. The only mistake here is the invasion of her privacy. You want accountability. Start with whoever leaked that photo. His tone was fire contained in ice. But the board didn't flinch. This isn't personal. Ethan, the chairwoman said gently, though her eyes said otherwise. We're protecting the company. Clara looked down at her hands. Her fingers were trembling slightly, the tiniest betrayal of the calm she was trying to hold. For a moment, she thought about letting him fight for her. It would have been easier, safe. But then she remembered Helen's words, handle this with grace, or you'll both drown. She drew a breath slow, deliberate, and stood. The room went still. If I may, she said softly. All eyes turned to her. I understand the concern, she continued, her voice steady even as her pulse raced. And if you're looking for someone to blame, I suppose I'm the easiest target. I won't deny what happened, but I will remind you that what defines this company isn't scandal. It's how we respond to it. A murmur passed through the table. She didn't stop. Drake Innovations built its brand on authenticity. We tell people to take risks, to fail fast, to own their truths. Maybe it's time we live that message ourselves. Are you suggesting we lean into this? One of them asked incredulously. I'm suggesting we stop pretending we're immune to being human, she replied. People don't trust perfection anymore. They trust honesty. Ethan watched her half pride, half awe as she continued. Let's issue a statement together, she said, not to defend ourselves, but to redefine what leadership means in moments like this. Call it what it is. Two professionals navigating imperfection with integrity. Let that be our story. The room fell into silence. One of the older members, a man with silver hair and cautious eyes, leaned forward. You're proposing transparency as a strategy, I'm proposing truth as one, Clara said. Her voice didn't shake now, not once, but her hands hidden under the table were trembling so hard she had to press them flat to keep them still. Helen, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. It's bold, she said, unorthodox, which is exactly why it might work. We can't control gossip, but we can own our narrative. The chairwoman glanced between them, uncertain. And if the media twists it further, Ethan stepped in then. They will, he said. They always do. But we'll have the advantage of not hiding. People respect courage, even when they don't understand it. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of it all, power, reputation, risk balanced precariously in the air. Then, slowly, Helen nodded. Draft the statement. Let's see how it reads. Ethan looked at Clara. She nodded once. They left the room together, the quiet of the hallway a relief after the suffocating tension inside. When the elevator doors closed, Ethan finally exhaled. You didn't have to do that. Yes, she said. I did. He turned to her, his expression softening. Your hands were shaking. I know. But your voice, he said, almost smiling, it didn't. She looked ahead, watching the floor numbers blink down slowly. If I'm going to fall, I want it to be standing. The elevator stopped. Neither moved. The doors stayed open as if giving them a chance to breathe before the world waited again. Clara, he said quietly. She met his eyes. Whatever happens next, you don't stand alone. Her reply was small, but it carried weight. I never expected you to let me. When she walked back to her office, the sunlight was hitting the glass just right, fractured, golden, defiant. The whispers hadn't stopped. The headlines would come, the doubt would follow, but for the first time since the photo, she felt something steadier than fear. Resolve. She sat down, opened her laptop, and began typing the words that would carry both of them through the storm. Truth isn't damage control. It's direction. Her hands were still trembling, but her heart was steady. The lights were softer than usual, warm, forgiving. Clara sat alone in the studio Drake Innovations used for product announcements, though this time there was no teleprompter, no script polished by PR, just a camera, a stool, and a heart that refused to hide. Helen stood behind the monitor, arms crossed but eyes kind. Ethan was nearby, silent, watching her like a man balancing on the edge of both pride and fear. "Ready?" the cameraman asked. Clara nodded, exhaling slowly. "Let's do it." The red light blinked on. For a second, the hum of the equipment filled the room. Then she began. "I've spent my career helping companies tell their stories," she said, voice calm, steady. "But this week reminded me stories don't always go the way we plan. Sometimes they surprise us. Sometimes they expose the parts we'd rather keep hidden." Her hands rested loosely in her lap, the faintest tremor in her fingers. A photo circulated this week. One moment, out of context. It's easy to assume, to reduce people to headlines. But I believe something different, that truth can survive, even in noise. She looked directly into the lens, and for a moment, it didn't feel like a camera. It felt like confession. Drake Innovations was built on honesty and courage. So, let's live that. No spin, no excuses. Just two people who forgot for a moment that the world was watching. We're human. We make mistakes. And we move forward with integrity and tact. She paused, letting the silence breathe. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening. The light went off. No one spoke. Then Helen exhaled, a small smile tugging her lips. "You just did more for this company in 2 minutes than any crisis firm could in 2 months." Clara smiled faintly. "Let's hope the world agrees." It did. By the next morning, the video had gone viral, but not for scandal. Headlines shifted tone, courage over conformity. When honesty becomes leadership, comments filled with words like authentic, refreshing, real. Even the cynics, the ones who thrived on controversy, had to admit it was hard to attack sincerity when it came without armor. The board, predictably, called another emergency meeting. But this one felt different. No accusation, no tension sharp enough to cut air, just quiet surprise and, maybe, reluctant respect. Helen spoke first. "It's working," she said. "Engagement is up, client confidence is stabilizing, investors are cautiously optimistic." You turned the fire into light. Clara didn't say much. She just nodded, feeling the relief wash over her, not triumph. Just release. When the meeting ended, Ethan caught up to her in the hall. "You handled that perfectly," he said. She gave a soft laugh. "Perfectly." My voice cracked twice. "That's why it worked." They walked side by side toward the elevators, their steps quiet against the marble floor. Outside, the city was waking up, sunlight glinting off windows, car horns, the hum of life returning to normal. Inside, something had shifted too. He looked at her then, not as his employee or his complication, but as something else entirely. Equal, steady, unafraid. "You realize," he said, "that you just rewrote the company's definition of leadership." She smiled, eyes forward. Maybe it was overdue. They stepped into the elevator, the doors closed, enclosing them in the soft reflection of glass and silence. He wanted to say something to thank her, to tell her how much her strength had unsettled and anchored him at the same time. But words failed him. They usually did around her. She noticed. Of course she did. "You don't have to say anything," she murmured. "Just don't undo it." "I won't," he said. "Not this time." For a while, neither moved. The hum of the elevator, the faint echo of their breathing. It was enough. When they reached the ground floor, she stepped out first, sunlight washing over her like a quiet victory. He stayed behind for a moment, watching her through the closing doors. Later, in his office, Ethan replayed the video again, not for damage control, but for something he couldn't quite name. The way her voice trembled slightly on the word human. The pause before we move forward, it was more than strategy. It was grace. He leaned back in his chair, eyes on the screen, trying to focus on the metrics Helen had sent impressions, shares, sentiment analysis. But all he saw was her face, calm, steady, honest. He'd led companies through crises before market crashes, lawsuits, betrayals, but nothing had ever felt this personal, this exposing. She had stood in the fire he'd partly created and walked out carrying both of their names with dignity, and somehow it made him ache, admiration, longing, two emotions that couldn't coexist without breaking something. He pressed his thumb and forefinger against his eyes, forcing a breath. "Don't," he whispered to himself. Not again. He'd spent years building walls to keep emotion from interfering with judgment, and yet Clara Monroe had stepped through every one of them like they were made of smoke. A knock on his door pulled him back. Helen stepped in. "You saw the numbers," he nodded. "They're good. They're more than good," she said. "You should be proud." He gave a small smile. "She should be." Helen watched him for a moment, reading more than he said. "You're learning something. Ethan, maybe for the first time." "What's that?" "That leadership isn't control," she said softly. "It's trust." When she left, he sat there for a long time, the afternoon sun creeping across the office floor. Through the glass, he could see Clara down below, standing with her team laughing at something, gesturing as she spoke. It wasn't just confidence anymore. It was ownership. He smiled not with power, but with peace. Maybe, for the first time in his life, he didn't need to lead alone. And for Clara, standing among her people, the weight that had haunted her since that first morning, the spilled coffee, the late arrival, the mistake that changed everything finally began to fade. Because now, for the first time, she understood something simple and freeing. You don't earn dignity by being flawless. You earn it by standing up, even when the world is watching. It started with a voice raised too loud for the hallway. Clara hadn't meant to overhear. She'd only gone to drop off a report outside Ethan's office. But the door, half open, let the words slip through like shards of glass. "You think you're the only one who gets to break the rules?" Ryan's voice sharp, bitter. "You make one reckless move, and suddenly it's noble visionary. But when I do it, it's chaos." Ethan's tone was lower, controlled, but each word came like a held breath. "This isn't about you." "The hell it's not," Ryan shot back. "It's always about you. You build this perfect world where every decision is justified. Every mistake looks intentional because you're Ethan Drake. The genius. The savior." Clara froze in the hallway, her hand tightening around the folder. The sound of something hitting the desk, a folder. Maybe, or a fist. Ethan's voice rose, raw now. "What do you want from me, Ryan?" "An apology. For being the one who cleans up after your messes." Ryan laughed, a hollow sound. "You mean after you make them disappear, just like you'll try to do with this one." The silence that followed was thick, electric. Then Ethan said quietly, "You leaked it, didn't you?" The air in the hallway seemed to stop moving. Ryan didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was flat. "Yeah, I did." The sound of it made something twist inside Clara. Ethan's next words came out like thunder. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ryan snapped back, louder. "I gave the world what it wanted, the truth." "You preach transparency now, remember? Or does that only apply when it's convenient for your image?" Ethan took a step forward. She could hear it, the weight of his shoes on the wood. "You didn't do this for the truth. You did it because you can't stand that someone sees me, really sees me, and it's not you." Ryan laughed again, but it cracked halfway through. "You think this is about Clara? She defended me when no one else would," Ethan said. "She brought this company back from the edge. And you, I warned you." Ryan's voice broke then, not in anger, but something closer to hurt. "She's changing you, Ethan, making you soft, making you human, and you hate it. You hate that she's better at your job than you are." The words landed like stones. Ethan didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, heavier. "You really think that's what this is? That I'm jealous of her?" Ryan's silence was its own admission. Ethan exhaled a sound that wasn't quite anger, not quite pain. "I built this place to protect us," he said softly. "From the noise, from the world, from ourselves, and you—" He stopped, his voice breaking for the first time. "You tore it down." Ryan's tone shifted then, quieter, almost pleading. "No, Ethan. I just stopped pretending it was perfect." For a long time, neither spoke. The quiet between them was heavier than the shouting. Clara could feel it pressing through the door, seeping into her chest. "Finally," Ethan said, almost to himself. "You're still that kid who sets fires just to see if someone will put them out." Ryan's reply was sharp. "And you're still the man who pretends the smoke doesn't choke him." That silence again. Then, suddenly, a noise, the scrape of a chair, the sound of footsteps. The door swung open. Ryan stopped short when he saw Clara standing there. For a split second, no one spoke. "Listening in," he said, voice dripping with mockery, though his eyes looked tired, broken. "I didn't mean to," she said quietly. "Of course you didn't," he muttered, brushing past her. His cologne cedar and something sharper lingered as he disappeared down the hall. Clara turned back toward the open door. Ethan stood near the window, his back to her, hands on the edge of the desk like he needed something solid to hold on to. She stepped closer. "Ethan?" He didn't turn. "You heard." She hesitated. "Most of it." He nodded once, still staring out at the city. He's always been this way. Reckless, brilliant, and underneath it all, lost. Clara moved closer. "He's hurting." "So am I," he said quietly. Something in his voice, the weariness. The truth made her chest ache. "Why did he do it? Because he could," Ethan said. "Because he hates seeing me care about something he can't control." She watched his reflection in the glass. His shoulders looked heavier, older somehow. "He's your brother," she said. He closed his eyes. That used to mean something. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the city outside filled the space between them, the faint rhythm of life continuing, despite everything. "I'll talk to him," Clara said softly. "No." Ethan turned finally, his eyes sharp again. "You've done enough. This isn't your war." She met his gaze, calm but steady. "It kind of is." He frowned. "How?" "Because I'm the spark that lit it." He shook his head, stepping closer. "Don't take responsibility for his choices, or mine." The room fell into stillness again. Only the rain against the glass broke it gentle, rhythmic, like it had been waiting for the right moment to fall. Clara looked down at her hands. "He doesn't hate you, you know? He just wants to matter." Ethan's voice softened. He always did. He just didn't know how. When she looked up, he was staring at her, not with anger now, but with something fragile. "You shouldn't have heard that," he said. "I needed to," she replied. "Sometimes truth doesn't wait for an invitation." He gave a small, sad smile. "You sound like her? My mother, she used to say that." For a long moment, they just stood there, two people caught between loyalty and loss, pride and pain. Down the hall, a door slammed. The echo lingered, long after Ryan was gone. Ethan turned back to the window. "He'll come back," he said softly. "He always does." Clara didn't answer. She didn't know if that was hope or denial. But as she walked away, she carried both his words and Ryan's, and the uneasy truth between them. In a company built on innovation, the most fragile thing was still the human heart, and for the first time, she wasn't sure which brother she felt more sorry for. The news broke quietly, not with drama, but with the kind of stillness that follows something long overdue. The board had discovered everything: Ryan's confession, the digital trail, the leak that had almost torn the company apart. It wasn't a scandal this time, just a quiet ending. The meeting lasted less than 20 minutes. Ryan didn't fight, he didn't argue, he just signed the resignation papers, pushed them across the table, and said, "Guess that's that." No one met his eyes. Ethan watched in silence, his face unreadable. He'd prepared himself for this moment or so, he thought. But when Ryan stood, when he gave that small, defiant half smile that used to mean, "I'm fine," something inside him cracked. "Ryan," he said softly. His brother paused at the door. "I didn't want it to end like this." Ryan turned, his voice quieter now. "It was always going to end like this. You just didn't want to see it." And then he was gone. Afterward, Ethan didn't go back to his office. He just walked, past the rows of glass rooms, past the employees pretending not to look, past the space where everything had once felt like control. He ended up by the river without realizing how. The Charles stretched before him, cold and gray, reflecting a sky that looked like it couldn't decide whether to rain or forgive. Clara found him there hours later, sitting on a bench, his coat unbuttoned, his hair ruffled by the wind. He didn't look up when she approached. "They told me," she said softly. He nodded, eyes still on the water. "It's done." She sat beside him, leaving just enough space for air and silence. The sound of the river filled the gaps. "For what it's worth," she said. "You did what you had to." He gave a quiet laugh, the kind that held no humor. "That's the problem, isn't it? I've been doing what I had to for years. For him, for this company, for everyone but myself." She looked at him, then really looked, the lines around his eyes, the weariness sitting just beneath his calm. "You've been protecting him since forever." He nodded. "When our parents died, he was 17. Angry at the world. I thought if I kept fixing things for him, he'd eventually learn, but all I taught him was that he could break anything, and I'd pick up the pieces." His voice wavered slightly, just enough to betray the fatigue underneath. Clara didn't say anything. She just listened, the kind of listening that doesn't rush to comfort, but allows space for ache. After a long silence, Ethan spoke again. "When I was 10, my dad took us fishing here. He told us the river carries everything eventually. The dirt, the leaves, even the things you wish you could hold on to. I didn't understand it then. I do now." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of salt and rain. Clara tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Maybe that's not loss," she said quietly. "Maybe it's just the river's way of reminding you to let go." He smiled faintly. "You sound like him?" Maybe he was right. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had built empires, signed contracts, and carried burdens no one else saw. "I don't know how to stop fixing things," he admitted. "Then stop trying to fix yourself like you're broken," she said. "You're not." He turned to her, something raw in his gaze. "You think vulnerability is strength, don't you?" "I know it is," she said, "because it's the only thing that makes strength real." For a moment, neither spoke. The river moved quietly, brushing against the banks like a secret being kept. Ethan finally said, "You should hate him." "I don't." "Why?" "Because hating him wouldn't make him better, and it wouldn't make you free." He looked back toward the water, his jaw tightening, then softening. "He's my brother," he murmured, "even after everything." "I know. Then you also know that forgiving him doesn't mean trusting him again." Clara nodded. "It just means you can breathe again." The sky had begun to darken, the first hints of evening brushing the river in amber light. People passed by, joggers, couples, students with backpacks, all of them living their quiet, ordinary moments. Ethan envied them, the simplicity, the unburdened rhythm of life. "I used to think leadership meant being the strongest person in the room," he said, never flinching, never bending. "But lately you're realizing it's the opposite," she finished softly. He smiled, a tired but genuine smile. You read me too easily. That's because you stopped hiding, she said. He looked at her, then really looked. The way the fading light touched her hair, the calm in her eyes, the steadiness she carried even when everything else was falling apart. For the first time in years, he let the silence between them feel safe. The water shimmered, reflecting city lights now, small constellations floating on the surface. I'll miss him, Ethan said finally. You should, but I won't chase him this time. Clara reached out, resting her hand lightly on his. That's not abandonment, she said. That's love. 2. He nodded slowly, her words sinking in like warmth after a long cold. They sat there until the sky turned indigo, until the city behind them hummed softly with the noise of moving on. When they finally stood to leave, Ethan looked back at the river one last time. Do you think it ever forgets, he asked. Clara smiled gently. No, but it learns how to keep flowing anyway. They walked away together, side by side, their reflections trailing briefly across the water before disappearing into the current, not lost, just carried forward. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Drake didn't feel the need to control the tide. The first morning of the new quarter dawned clear and cold over Boston. The river shimmered like brushed steel, and from the glass walls of Drake Innovations, the skyline seemed almost reborn, cleaner, steadier, quieter. Inside, the hum of the office felt different too, not tense, not mechanical, alive. Clara walked through the lobby with a calm she hadn't known in months. Her badge now read Chief Marketing Officer. The title still felt strange, not because she didn't earn it, but because it didn't feel like a crown. It felt like a promise. The TruthWorks campaign had gone live 6 weeks earlier. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud. It was real stories from employees, customers, partners, all talking about mistakes, comebacks, and courage. No filters, no polish, just people being honest. And it had done something no one expected. It worked. Sales climbed, yes, but more than that, something invisible shifted. People started speaking to each other again. Meetings that used to sound like monologues turned into conversations. Feedback flowed up as often as it flowed down. The fear that used to hang in the halls like frost began to melt. Ethan noticed it first. You've turned this place human again, he said one afternoon, standing in her office doorway. Clara smiled over her coffee. That was the idea. He lingered there a moment, watching her rearrange the small potted plant on her desk. You make it look easy. It's not, she said softly. It's just worth it. Later that day, Helen stopped by a rare thing now that she was preparing to retire. She still carried that sharp humor, but her voice had softened, her eyes warmer. You've done good work, Clara, she said. They trust you. That's harder than getting them to like you. Clara looked up from her notes. You taught me that. Helen chuckled. I taught you how to survive. You taught me how to listen again. She paused, glancing around the office that used to hum like a machine and now pulsed like something living. Don't let success harden you. Okay, Clara tilted her head. That's how I'll know I failed. Helen smiled that knowing, proud kind of smile that feels like a goodbye wrapped in blessing. Exactly. As days passed, the rhythm of the company found a heartbeat that was neither Ethan's nor Ryan's nor hers alone. It was everyone's. Teams started small rituals. Friday breakfasts, open feedback hours, even coffee confessionals, where employees could share one honest story a week, no consequences, just conversation. And Clara, who once worried about being late to an interview, now found herself guiding an entire culture towards something softer and stronger. Still, late at night, when the office was empty and the city lights painted reflections on the glass, she'd catch herself thinking about everything that had to break for this to begin. The spilled coffee, the slap, the shame, the scandal, the silence. Every misstep had somehow built the bridge she now walked. Sometimes Ethan joined her in those quiet hours. No meetings, no agenda, just the two of them sitting by the window with tea instead of coffee, watching the skyline. "You ever think about how close we came to losing it all?" he'd ask. "Every day," she'd answer. "That's why I take care of it differently." He'd nod, thoughtful. "You lead better than I ever did." She smiled, not out of pride, but gratitude. "No. You just led us here so I could." There were moments she saw the weight still in his shoulders, the absence of Ryan, the fatigue of rebuilding not just a business, but a life. But there was light in him now, too. The kind that comes when a man stops chasing perfection and starts choosing peace. One afternoon, he walked into a staff meeting unannounced, something he rarely did anymore. Clara was at the head of the table, guiding the team through their next campaign proposal. Her tone was steady, her humor easy, her leadership quiet but firm. When the meeting ended, he caught her as everyone filed out. "You've got this place breathing again," he said. She shrugged, smiling. "I just reminded them that work isn't supposed to hurt." That evening, she stayed back to finish up a few reports. The city outside glowed in the soft gold of late autumn. The sound of wind brushing against glass mixed with distant laughter from the street below. She thought of Helen's words again. "Don't let success harden you." She leaned back in her chair, letting the moment settle. Success had never been her goal. Wholeness was. Connection was. She picked up a small frame on her desk, a photo from the first TruthWorks event. Dozens of employees, all laughing, holding signs that read, "I'm still learning." "I made mistakes too. I'm better for it." Clara smiled. They weren't slogans. They were mirrors. She turned off the lights, walking down the hall that used to feel endless and cold. The air smelled faintly of paper and coffee, but underneath it was something else, warmth. In the lobby, she saw Helen waiting by the elevator, coat draped over her arm. "Heading out?" Clara asked. "Yeah," Helen said. "Just wanted to see it one last time before I let it go." "You built this, you know," Clara said. Helen shook her head gently. "No, I built the walls. You built the windows." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. "Don't forget what I said," Helen added as she stepped inside. "I won't." When the doors closed, Clara stood for a moment, watching her reflection in the glass. Not the nervous woman who once ran through rain to a late interview, but someone steady, grounded, quietly changed. Outside. Boston pulsed with life horns, footsteps, the hum of the river. She walked out into it, coat over her shoulders, breath visible in the cold air. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new deadlines, new decisions. But tonight, she let herself pause. Because rebuilding, she realized, wasn't about restoring what was lost. It was about creating something better, something honest, human, and alive. And as she crossed the street, the city lights caught her face, soft and certain. She smiled to herself, whispering the words Helen had once told her, and that now belonged to her too. "Don't let success harden you." The wind carried her reply like a promise. "That's how I'll know I failed." The city glowed beneath them like a field of fallen stars. Boston after midnight, quiet but alive. Its hum softened by distance. The rooftop of Drake Innovations stretched wide and still, the wind carrying the faint scent of rain and asphalt. Clara stood near the edge, her hands resting lightly on the railing, eyes tracing the river's silver curve. Behind her, the elevator door slid open with a soft chime. Ethan stepped out, coat unbuttoned, the night air brushing against his shirt sleeves. "You're still here?" he said. "I like it up here," she replied, without turning. "It's the only place where the city doesn't feel like it's rushing me." He smiled, walking closer. I was hoping you'd say that. She looked over her shoulder, one eyebrow raised. You were hoping I'd stay maybe, he said, stopping beside her. Maybe I just needed to say something I can't seem to fit into a meeting room. The pause that followed was soft, almost kind, the kind that lets the truth breathe before it lands. Clara tilted her head, studying his face in the dim light. That sounds serious. It is. He took a slow breath. I've spent my life making decisions with data, logic, and risk assessment. But for once, I don't want to measure this. I just want to say it. The wind picked up, tugging at his hair. He looked out at the skyline, the glass towers glowing like quiet sentinels. I love you, Clara. Her breath caught, not because she didn't see it coming, she had, but because of how he said it, not like a confession, like a truth finally allowed to exist. He kept his gaze on the city. It's not impulsive. It's not the chaos of everything we've survived. It's steady. Like this, he gestured to the skyline, to the stillness that stretched between them. I didn't even realize how much of my life was noise until you walked into it and refused to whisper. Clara smiled faintly. Refused to whisper. That's one way to describe slapping my future boss. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. You were the first person who wasn't afraid of me. Or maybe the first who saw through me. For a while, neither spoke. The wind moved gently around them, carrying the city's distant sounds, a siren, a car door, the faint rhythm of life below. Clara turned to face him fully. Ethan, she said softly, you don't owe me anything. Not gratitude, not this. I know, he said. That's why it's real. Her eyes searched his. You're sure he nodded, for the first time in a long time. Something in his voice disarmed her, not the strength, but the peace in it. She looked away for a moment, her fingers tracing the cold edge of the railing. We've both made a mess of things, she said. Mistakes, scandals, walls. Maybe that's how we found each other, he said. She let out a quiet laugh. Through the wreckage, through what survived it, the night stretched quiet again. Above them, the stars blurred slightly as clouds drifted past. Clara turned back toward the city, the lights flickering below like small, persistent hopes. You know, she said, we've survived the worst version of us. Maybe we deserve the real one. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. Maybe we do. He stepped closer slow, careful until his hand brushed hers. Not a claim, just a question. Clara didn't pull away. They stood like that for a while, the wind moving through their silence, their reflections faint in the glass behind them. Then she looked up at him. Really looked. The sharpness that once made him intimidating had softened. His eyes, usually calculating, now held something simple. Trust. Ethan reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. You changed everything, he said quietly. She smiled, a little shy, a little brave. So did you. And then he kissed her slow, unhurried, like a sentence finished after a long pause. No grand gestures, no music. Just the hum of the city below and the soft rhythm of two people who had finally stopped running. When they pulled apart, the quiet between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of things said and unsaid, of understanding that didn't need translation. Ethan looked at her, his voice low and certain. Whatever comes next, we face it the same way we got here. How's that, she asked. Together, imperfect, honest. She smiled, leaning lightly against his shoulder. That sounds like the start of something terrifying. He laughed softly. Good means it's worth it. The night air cooled, carrying the scent of rain again. Far below, the Charles River glimmered like liquid glass. The lights on the water danced small, fragile, alive. Clara looked out over it all, then back at Ethan. You know, she said, this is the first time I've seen you look at the city without trying to control it. He glanced down at her, a quiet smile curving at his lips. That's because, for once, I don't need to. They stood there a while longer. No more words, no more masks, just breath, warmth, and the kind of silence that feels like home. Somewhere below, a church bell chimed once. The sound drifted upward, fading into the wind. Ethan took her hand fully then, fingers interlacing with certainty. "You'll stay?" he asked. Clara squeezed his hand gently. "For as long as the city lights are still on," he smiled. "Then I guess we have forever." They turned toward the skyline together, the glow of the city spilling over them, gold, soft, forgiving. And when the wind brushed past, it carried a feeling neither could name, only recognize. The kind that comes after surviving, after rebuilding, after learning that sometimes love doesn't save you. It finds you quietly, on a rooftop, under the honest light of everything you've become. 6 months passed quietly, like the slow unfolding of a long breath. Boston had settled into early summer, the kind where mornings smelled faintly of rain and lilac, and the river glimmered soft beneath the sun. Drake Innovations was different now. Not just successful alive. The walls that once echoed with urgency now carried laughter, conversations, music from someone's playlist in the corner office. The TruthWorks campaign had grown beyond marketing. It had become a culture. People didn't hide behind perfect anymore. They spoke, they trembled, they learned, and somehow that made the work better. Clara walked through the lobby one morning, coffee in hand, stopping to watch a group of interns debate color palettes near the window. Their energy reminded her of herself, once hopeful, uncertain, unpolished. She smiled, knowing that this was how real change looked: quiet, gradual, human. Her phone buzzed, a message from the front desk. "You have mail." It wasn't digital. It was a postcard, the kind people rarely sent anymore. The image on the front was a forest in Oregon, sun cutting through mist. On the back, written in uneven script, just one line: "I'm doing better. Don't let him carry it alone." Signed, Ryan. Clara held the card for a moment, feeling its weight light, but heavy with meaning. She slipped it into her notebook. Forgiveness had taken its own shape, not spoken, but alive in the space between what was broken and what endured. Later that week, Helen stopped by the office one last time, retirement day. She wore her favorite navy scarf and carried no briefcase, only a small white envelope. "You're really leaving," Clara said, smiling softly. Helen nodded. "I've taught all I can. Now it's your turn to forget half of it and do it your way." They both laughed. Then Helen handed her the envelope. "For later," she said. After she left, Clara waited until the office was quiet before opening it. Inside was a single handwritten note. "Courage doesn't mean never shaking. It means you speak while you tremble." Clara read it twice. The words felt like a pulse, gentle, steady, real. She slipped the note into her planner beside Ryan's postcard. 2 different lessons, both about grace. That evening, she found Ethan on the rooftop. He was already there, as always, coffee in one hand, the skyline reflected in his glasses. "You still come up here?" she asked. He turned, smiling. "Only when I need perspective," which is most days. She joined him, taking the second cup he'd brought, black, strong, exactly how she liked it. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the light drift across the buildings. The company below them moved like a quiet engine, smooth, reliable. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Peaceful," he said, "and a little terrified. Which I think means I'm alive." She chuckled. "You sound like Helen. She was right about almost everything." The breeze caught her hair, brushing it against his sleeve. "She left me something," Clara said. "A note." "Oh," it said. "Courage doesn't mean never shaking. It means you speak while you tremble." Ethan's expression softened. "That sounds like her." They both fell quiet again. Below them, the city moved, cars gliding, lights flickering on one by one. It wasn't noise, it was rhythm. "Do you ever think," he began slowly, "that all of this, the chaos, the mistakes, the fights, it was just the world's way of shaking us awake?" She nodded, eyes still on the horizon. Maybe the shaking was the point. For a while, neither spoke. The air smelled faintly of roasted coffee and warm metal. Somewhere below, a train horn sounded distant, grounding. Ethan glanced over at her. "You know, 6 months ago I thought strength was control. Now, I think it's trust." Clara smiled. "And you're learning to trust I'm learning," he said, "that I don't have to do it alone." The moment hung there, simple, unforced. Clara set her cup down, turning toward him. "It's strange," she said softly. "The worst day of my life started this." He smiled, remembering. "The interview. The slap," she corrected, laughing under her breath. He laughed too quiet, genuine. "I'll never live that down. Will I not while I'm around?" The sound of their laughter faded into the wind, leaving behind something deeper, the kind of silence that feels earned. They stood side by side as dusk settled into night. The city lights stretched outward, reflecting in the river like scattered candles. Clara breathed in the cool air, letting it fill her chest. The world had changed. Yes, but more than that she had. The woman who once rushed into an interview, drenched in coffee and panic, now stood here, calm and certain, leading not by fear, but by presence. Ethan reached for her hand, not out of need, but out of understanding. She didn't pull away. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "I'm grateful it started the way it did." She smiled, eyes on the horizon. "Sometimes, the mistake you fear most." He finished her thought, voice low, steady, "becomes the door you were meant to open." For a long moment, the two of them simply stood there watching the city breathe, the lights flicker, the world turn. And in that stillness between what had ended and what had begun, there was no noise, no judgment, no hurry, only the sound of the wind, the warmth of shared quiet, and the feeling of something finally, beautifully whole. Life rarely unfolds the way we plan it. Sometimes, what feels like failure, being late, making a mistake, saying the wrong thing, becomes the very moment that changes everything. Clara's story reminds us that dignity isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, trembling if we must, but still speaking, still trying. In a world that often rewards power and control, this story whispers a quieter truth. Real strength is gentleness. Leadership isn't about being unshakable, it's about being human enough to admit fear and brave enough to move forward anyway. We all carry moments we wish we could erase, but perhaps those moments are simply doorways leading us toward understanding, forgiveness, and connection. As we grow older, it's easy to believe our best chances have passed. Yet sometimes, grace arrives not as a grand event, but as a soft morning, a shared smile, a second chance. So, when life feels uncertain or messy, remember, Clara, spill the coffee, walk in late, speak with courage, because every mistake has the quiet potential to lead us home to ourselves and to the people meant to walk beside us. Thank you for spending your time with us and for listening to this story. If it touched your heart or made you reflect on your own journey, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring gentle, meaningful stories about courage, kindness, and the quiet beauty of everyday life. We hope each story reminds you it's never too late to begin again.